Backyard Bee Builder here. Happy Halloween, everyone. I hope you're having an awesome day. Today I wanted to go over how to make grease patties. Now, grease patties are primarily used for the control of mites in your hive. It kind of helps maintain the numbers of mites in your hive, particularly during the winter months when a lot of the treatments don't work really well when it's cold. So come along with me and we'll make some grease patties. Okay, to start off, you want to have a few basic ingredients. Here I have about 4 pounds of just regular white granulated sugar. I've got a container of all vegetable shortening or Crisco, and you're going to need about 1.5 pounds of that, or half a container full. Also right here you can see I've got mineral salt, and this is something you get from any store that sells animal products, like for livestock and IFA and a store like that. Now this is mineral salts. Typically at those stores they'll have large containers of it, so if you don't want to get such a large bag, sometimes they'll sell also at just a regular pet store. However, we don't want to use it in this form. It's a little bit too coarse. It doesn't mix very well, and so I'll throw this in my blender and you'll get something more along the lines of this. And this is just that mineral salt all blended up, and it's almost like a flour, but it mixes a lot better that way. With that also, I have some wintergreen oil, and this is used in grease patties during the winter time. Now this is not approved for human consumption, so you can't have it in your grease patties at the same time you have honey supers on. These grease patties I recommend you use year-round. However, I'll typically make 2 separate batches for the summer and in the winter time. Also, we have honey. Now this is some of my own honey, so I know and I can trust it. But you need to be really wary. If you don't have honey of your own, or honey that you can trust, you shouldn't use honey in this recipe. You only need about 1/2 pound of it, but if you just go get some honey at the store, it's been mixed in a big vat, and so there's no way to know if they have AFB, American Foul Brood, in that spores in that honey. And so if you mix it in your grease patties and those spores are in there, you could infect your hive with it. So be really wary that the honey you're using is from your own hives or someone that you know and trust. If you don't have honey and you don't have access to honey like that, you can also use a good substitute is just some corn syrup, and you would actually water that down a little bit. But you can just use the regular corn syrup, 2-to-1 ratio, 2 parts corn syrup to 1 part water, and that can be a substitute for honey. But today I have it, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. So wintergreen essential oil is used to help clog the airways of the mites, and it can help to suffocate them, particularly tracheal mites. They're very difficult to treat, and so this is something that seems to help with the treatment of them. However, make sure that when you get your wintergreen oil that it is 100% pure. It can't be a fragrance oil that you get from like a grocery store or something, because that has a lot of fillers in it. It can't have any alcohol or anything. It has to be 100%. So to start off, I've got my 4 pounds of sugar here, and I've pre-measured it, so I already know ingredients. You always mix your dry ingredients first, and then I'll get 1/3 cup of my mineral salt that I've already blended up in the blender. With that, you can just mix that around. Okay, once you get that mixed up, you can add 1.5 pounds of shortening. Now, this is a 3-pound container, so I'm just going to go ahead and scoop out half of it. Okay, once you have that in, you need to add 1/2 pound of honey. 1/2 pound of honey comes out to be about 1.5 cups, a little less than 1.5 cups. So I'll go ahead and add that. After you get done with that, here comes the fun part. Okay, now that I've got it all mixed up and it's got a good consistency, it's holding together, it's not crumbling all over the place. If you get to the point where it's still kind of crumbly after you've mixed it up and you've really mixed it thoroughly, you can add a little bit more honey or a little bit more shortening to make sure that it's going to hold its shape and be in a good solid ball and not just crumble. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take half of my mixture out and put it in a separate bowl, because I want part of this to be for winter use and part of it to be for Now today I'm actually going to use tea tree oil and wintergreen oil. They're considered to be pretty interchangeable. They do kind of the same thing, but I kind of wanted to get a mixture of them. Typically, I don't put in as much as a lot of the recipes recommend. I don't want it to be too overwhelming for the bees where it would cover up any pheromone scents. So I'll typically do about a half an ounce of each one of them, and I'll just put that into this recipe. Now when you're mixing up the oils, it's recommended that you not use your bare hands, so I'm going to go ahead and use gloves for this. Okay, all done. Now it's time to get them into serving sizes for the different hives. So when you're separating this for different hives, you're going to want it to be about the size of a small hamburger. So I typically will just take kind of a small fistful, and you can see it's just a small patty. I'm going to separate those out into patties for the different hives. Okay, so I've got all of my patties separated out. Here I've got my winter ones, and up here I've got my summer ones. Make sure you keep them separate. Now that I've got them all made, I'm just going to get little baggies and stick them in here. Now by doing this, I can keep them separate. And these don't have to be used right away. If you're not using them right away, you can just put them in your freezer, and they can stay good in the freezer until you're ready to use them. So I'll use my winter ones now, and then my summer ones will be ready for me come summer. Now one of these patties should last you a couple months, but you can always, on a warm day, peek in real quick and see if they've used it all. If they've used it all, you can replace it. Okay, now that we have our grease patties made, let's talk a little bit more in depth about grease patties and kind of the pros and cons to them. They do help. There have been studies to show that they help with tracheal mites as well as varroa mites, and so that's a benefit for sure, because it really is just going to help maintain the numbers of mites in your hive, and it's not going to work as a treatment really. It's just going to help stave off the numbers a little bit. So if you do have a large count of mites in your hive, I do suggest you do a treatment. However, if you're just trying to maintain, these will work. So kind of how they work is that as the bees feed off of the grease patties, they get coated in the grease. And that makes it difficult for the varroa mites to latch onto them, and it also disrupts their reproduction. So for whatever reason, studies show that using grease patties will actually help decrease the mites in your hive. And really with tracheal mites, there's not a whole lot you can do to prevent them. And so this is one of your main defenses against the tracheal. One of the problems with grease patties is that they are dependent upon the bees coming in contact with them. And so unlike some of the other treatments for mites, these don't work unless the mite actually comes in contact with it. So that makes it a little bit difficult for it to be effective. Also, they work well in the winter time, however, they get to be kind of messy in the summertime. And so some people won't use them in the summertime because of that. Another issue with grease patties is if you live in an area where hive beetles are an issue, it is said that they tend to attract hive beetles. And so I don't know that I would recommend using them in areas like that. I don't typically have issues with them in my area, and so that's why I use them. So that was my tutorial on how to make grease patties. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to know more about using essential oils in your hive, I can put a link to it down in the description. But that is all for today, and I'm the Backyard Bee Builder.